Welcome back to the On the Yellow podcast. We are back, and we have quite a lot to talk about. And I just want to start by just introducing ourselves again. Obviously, it's been a couple weeks now that we haven't had our episode, but we are starting again. It is episode 10, though. Episode 9, of course, was last episode, which was over a month ago, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's a long time no see.
A long time no see. So, of course, I am one of your hosts, Liam, and we got Zach in the booth.
Hello, hola, amigos.
All right. So, the FA Cup was played, of course, last week and into the weekend. There was a lot of drama, and it kind of reminded us why we love the beautiful game, but also reminded us why we love English football. You know, from the penalty drama in Wales to the upset in Macclesfield and to the nonchalant worldie scored by Szoboszlai in Liverpool.
And of course, we can't forget West Ham finally finding their level. You know, we beat a championship team.
West Ham found their level. Man United lost against Brighton. So we haven't found our level yet. Let's start with Wrexham, because what a moment. Wrexham beats Notts Forest 4-3 on penalties, and our buddy Sean Dyche was not happy.
I mean, it's kind of just another thing to add on to the fairy tale story of Wrexham. You know, coming from the National League to now beating a Premier League team. I don't think if you told any Wrexham fan that 10 years ago, they would believe you whatsoever. And I always see people saying that it doesn't count because they just put money in, they bought their way up. But any good owner will do that to the club they love. And, you know, it doesn't really make sense, that narrative, to me. How about you?
Well, I heard, and I also read Paul Mullen's autobiography, and I heard him talk about Wrexham and talk about the ownership. Obviously, Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds are the owners of Wrexham's football club, and they've been the owners for almost 6 years now. And of course, you know, there's a lot of backlash to that. People think, like you said, that they're just pushing money into the club and that it's not fair for the other clubs. But I heard from the players, especially Paul Mullen, talk about Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney and their involvement in the club, and it's not just for money. Ryan Reynolds has been seen in the dressing room before games, and especially during this FA Cup run, a lot of players have seen and heard from Ryan Reynolds, and he's been in and he talked about, you know, the culture of the club, and he really loves the club, and he also loves the town as well of Wrexham. And he said, Ryan Reynolds said, it's very neat to see that people from Wrexham, instead of saying they're from Wales, they're now saying they're from Wrexham, as the popularity of the club from the football level, but also through the Welcome to Wrexham documentary series, which is in its 5th season now. And we are happy to see that. And I think it's just another kind of story through Wrexham that we're seeing. And I would love to see Wrexham in the Premier League at some point. I don't know if it's going to be this season. I have a feeling that it might be maybe the season after. But right now they're on a trajectory that's going even higher to where they thought they would be when they got new owners. And it's really exciting to see. And obviously beating a Premier League outfit like Notts Forest, who had a remarkable season last year, and this season obviously not the best. It's just really good for the Wrexham fans, and I'm really happy to see that outcome.
Well, talking about them in promotion, they sit 9th in the table currently, but they are also only 1 point out of a playoff spot. So it's definitely not off the cards this year. I just think it'd be very unrealistic if they do go up. I think it would be a very, very rough Premier League season, maybe one of the worst we've seen, because they're still building something. I think they need at least another season in the championship to find a sort of a good squad that they think can carry them into the Premier League
Yep.
and be competitive at that level. But they are definitely on a very fast track towards it, sitting ninth in the championship in their first season at that level in a long time. It speaks loads to the players they've brought in, loads to the development, and I think they've had a really good recruitment process and they've spent well on players, especially when you look at Okonkwo, their goalie. That he's been there for a couple of years now, and he's just been stellar every time you see him on the pitch. He's just been a key piece to them climbing the ladder.
And it's just, yeah, I mean, they're the first team, I believe, in history of the English pyramid to have like back-to-back-to-back promotions or back-to-back promotions. And it's going to be interesting to see. I would want to see them get promoted, but also not in the sense of like, I don't want to see Wrexham in the Premier League and obviously not doing as well as people thought they would. Because obviously if Wrexham gets promoted, where whatever way they do, it would be neat to see Wrexham in the Premier League, but not necessarily for the players and the culture of the club, as it's going to be even harder to be in that level, because the Premier League and the Championship are like insane. There's insane levels to their games, and I have a feeling that if Wrexham gets promoted, it won't necessarily be the best thing, as obviously they would have the high of getting promoted multiple times back to back, but I just think that it won't be necessarily the best thing for a Wrexham team right now. I feel like they need to stay in the Championship maybe one more season and grow as a team, get more acquisitions with the Championship money that they're going to get, and hopefully get promoted within the next 2 years.
Well, if you even look at the Racecourse Ground, it's still under renovations at the moment. So I think getting a promotion to the Premier League would really strain a lot of people internally in the club and potentially, force certain projects to be rushed so for completion to the Premier League, because they don't have the largest stadium, and they're building a new end there. And if they have to rush it, I think it will just be more catastrophic for the club than gain, especially after putting all the money in. And I think there's certain things towards if they do get promoted this season, it would just maybe end in a Luton sort of situation where they were in the Premier League and then they got back-to-back relegations and now they're stuck in League One a little bit. I think they need to level out at the Championship level a bit, establish themselves at that level, and then try and push for promotion.
Yeah, that's why I was worried about too. It's obviously you saw Luton Town, they got promoted. Everyone was happy, and they had a decent Premier League season, actually. They did get relegated, but they had the fight to them, and they were beating teams and drawing teams that obviously on paper would be the team that would come out victorious, but they really showed the heart and determination of a team in a town like Luton. But yeah, they got relegated, and we thought they would stay in the Championship, maybe not get promoted, but stay in the Championship, still fighting, maybe top six. But they got relegated again, and now, like you said, they're sitting in League One, which they just don't really want to be there. And you don't want to see a Wrexham team that has so much potential to be a team that's back into where they were when they first started as a team, which they're one of the oldest teams in England. And I think you just want to keep this high and keep them playing to their best of their ability, and you don't want them to falter like a Luton Town. Now, the FA Cup, of course, is one of the oldest competitions. It's actually the oldest football competition in the world. I believe it started in around the 1870s, and it's come with a lot of drama, and this drama was seen in this third round with Macclesfield Town. Macclesfield Town obviously are playing in the National League North, which is below the National League, which is below the Championship 2, Championship 1, and, of course, the Championship and the Premier League. And they beat the Premier League outfit and the FA Cup reigning champions, Crystal Palace. What's your thoughts on Macclesfield Town's insane victory?
Well, it's definitely got to be the biggest upset of all time in the FA Cup. You know, the current champions, they got to use their special ball in the FA Cup one time,
Yep.
their special champions ball, and it'll never be seen again. So I think maybe what happened was, they came into the game thinking, it should be an easy win, we're the champions kind of thing, and they weren't ready for any sort of actual fight out of Macclesfield Town. And Macclesfield Town, they were ugly goals, but all that matters is they scored, and they stopped Crystal Palace from scoring at all until the 90th minute, when it was way too late in the game. And I think it proves the testament that no matter the opponent, you still have to work hard, and it's gonna leave a big mark in the competition for years, and people will remember it for sure.
Well, it's kind of like Manchester United losing against Grimsby Town. Obviously, as a Man United fan, I try to forget that, but every time the EFL Cup happens, you're always going to think that when Man United's playing, they're always going to say they lost against Grimsby. And this is the same thing. To put into perspective, when the game was played, Crystal Palace was sitting, I believe, 13th in the Premier League. They had a really good start to the season. Obviously, they won the FA Cup last season, and they won the Community Shield this season. And they were kind of gearing up for a really good season and possibly fighting for European places. But they see themselves mid-table, 13th, usually where Crystal Palace sits, right? And Macclesfield Town is 14th place, but they are 14th place, 116 places between the two teams. And they're 14th place, of course, in the National League North. Obviously, Wayne Rooney's brother is the manager. And obviously, I heard him say, when you come into those games, especially against a team like a Premier League team, and you're a Macclesfield Town, for example, you come into the game knowing that it's going to be really hard and you might not win that game. But what you do instead is you play it in a way that is just with heart, and you just play the game that you love. And that's what was seen in the Macclesfield game. They were playing the game they loved. And obviously, like you said, the goals weren't pretty, but they scored, and that's what matters. And obviously, Crystal Palace is now out, and Macclesfield now sees round 4 of the FA Cup.
I mean, they have another very tough opponent coming up, and Brentford, who's actually, I believe they're 5th in the Premier League right now, which nobody really saw that coming at the beginning of the season. So I do believe that the miracle run will end, but it's great to have seen it happen.
Yep.
At all. And, if they do somehow beat Brentford, that'd be insane. And I honestly, I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
Just, for the story. And I think it would be great for English football, as much as a Brentford fan would say the opposite.
Well, it's really cool to see these teams. That's why we love the FA Cup. Obviously, the FA Cup is this old competition, but it's the oldest competition for a reason. It's stood the test of time because of these games and because of allowing kind of football and all these teams to connect with each other. Even though they might not be a Premier League team, they can still connect with these Premier League footballers. One of the best things about this tournament is Premier League teams going to a Macclesfield Town, going to a Grimsby Town, and playing at these stadiums. And for these players that have part-time jobs to be able to play against their heroes or play against players that they watch on TV every Saturday and Sunday. And it's really cool to see. Obviously, like I said, Macclesfield Town is a part-time team, and that's what one of their coaches said. It's a part-time team. They only practice 2 days a week, and they also all have part-time jobs. Most notably was Sam Heathcote, their center back. He is actually a school teacher, which is really neat because there was a fun video online and it was Sam Heathcote coming back to his primary school, and they had an assembly for him with all the students congratulating him on his victory against Premier League outfit Crystal Palace, which it just must be something that you just can't really dream of, or something you just can't think is real, and you think you're in a dream, and it's really cool to see that.
Well, talking about like big teams going to play at small grounds, West Ham, they finally won a game
There you go.
where it doesn't really matter that much, not where we need to win, but if we can go on a little bit of a run in the cup, we'll be happy. Our next match is away from home at Burton Albion at the Pirelli Road Stadium. So,
do you think it's going to be like a Wigan situation where your team wins the FA Cup but also gets relegated in the same season?
I would not complain about playing in Europe if we get relegated. If we get relegated and end up in Europe, maybe we don't get promoted right away either. So that's something you have to think about too. It might not be the best, even, playing in Europe's pretty good. But if you're in the championship trying to fight for promotion and trying to win the Conference League, it's kind of rough.
Yeah. Well, you've won it before. So, I mean, you can hold your head up high that if you do win...
Jared Bowen
will
win a second Conference League if we
win a second Conference League. Now, obviously, we kind of moved on from this FA Cup game. I do want to talk quickly about the Liverpool game, and then I think we move on to your team, West Ham, which we've kind of had a little bit sprinkled in throughout this discussion on the FA Cup. But Liverpool played yesterday in the final game of round 3 of the FA Cup, which was Monday, and it was kind of cool. They beat Barnsley 4-1. Obviously, that's a win that they should be winning. But there was kind of some unlikely goal scorers in that game, especially one unlikely goal scorer, I should say, and that's our buddy Florian Wirtz. Florian Wirtz.
Well, how many goals does he have now? 2?
It something like that.
It's like 60 million a goal.
Yeah, no,
it's not a great signing.
Yeah, he scored his first goal against our second favorite team, Wolverhampton Wanderers, as we talk about them a lot, about their disaster season. But he scored against them, so he's showing his skill and class there.
I mean, West Ham couldn't score against them, so
there you go. Now, he scored. But what we saw from this game was this Wirtz and Ekitike kind of link up. So Ekitike scored with Wirtz assisting. Wirtz scored with Ekitike adding the assist. And, I think it's just really neat to see that link up and something that Liverpool maybe can hold their heads up high, because obviously this season is not like last year and they're struggling more. Obviously struggling, big team struggles, which is obviously fighting for top 4 and that 4th place. But it's really, I think it's something that Slot who's under fire recently, could maybe use. And obviously Wirtz, who hasn't been that player that he was on Leverkusen, it's something that he can hold up high and be like, you know what, I'm getting ready to fight for Liverpool, but also fight for my spot in the World Cup German squad.
I don't think he's necessarily fighting for a spot in that World Cup squad.
Yeah.
I think he's kind of already solidified in there.
Yeah.
Maybe a starting role he's fighting for, but I think he's pretty guaranteed to get onto the roster at this point, even if he has a terrible season.
I think with Wirtz, it might be either Liverpool's not working for him, or it might be the fact that maybe he's one of those players that just needs that season. And you see those videos where it's like, this player had a disaster season when he started, but revitalized his career. And maybe the next season he revitalizes it. Maybe Liverpool sacks Slot for some reason, and maybe they get a new manager in that favors Wirtz's game more. Maybe Xabi Alonso, you never know. But
wouldn't that be quite a reunion?
Exactly.
I think that would help him out tremendously, honestly.
Exactly. That would help out Wirtz tremendously. Obviously, you pay over $100 million for a player. you want him to produce, and he hasn't produced as much. He has some assists, but it's not necessarily what you've paid for him to produce. But through this game, Vert scored as well, but another thing that happened during that game was Dominic Szoboszlai in the first goal of the game, 8 minutes into the game, scored probably it was a very nice goal, but it was the most nonchalant celebration I've ever seen him. It was like he was practicing. So he got the ball 30 yards out and just like struck it from 30 yards out, and then it went in instead of reacting like it was something. Obviously, I think he's a professional and you're playing against a Barnsley team. I felt like he must have just thought, you know what, I'm not going to celebrate. I'm just going to show that I'm Premier League quality, and this is what Premier League players do. But it was just funny because obviously I think any other player, if you score something like that, would celebrate, as it was a beautiful finish.
I didn't see the goal. I just know that he scored a good free kick earlier this year from pretty far out too.
Well, he scored a beautiful free kick. He's actually been a very underrated player for Liverpool. He's really shown why he deserves that starting role on the team. He's been one of their best players this season, most consistent players this season, and obviously he is, with Hungary, and I believe Hungary's in the World Cup this year. Are they?
I'm not too sure.
Not too sure. Well, I mean, internationally, he's their best player, and he's played very well for them. All right, moving on. West Ham United. Obviously, we've sprinkled a little bit of your West Ham United, your team, into our FA Cup discussion because they finally met their match, as you said. What's your thoughts on the season right now? Obviously, almost every single pod episode when West Ham does something, we talk about it. It's the same thing with Manchester United. But West Ham United, since the last pod episode, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And you're seeing yourself in a kind of a mountain to climb, almost Mount Everest to climb now to try to get out of relegation and save your spot in the Premier League next season. So what's your thoughts on West Ham?
Well, we're 7 points adrift from safety and 8 points from Leeds. So, if we somehow put together a big winning streak and they lose a couple of games, things change again. But at this current moment, it's really not looking like that's going to be a possibility.
Yep.
I mean, there's been so much talk already of sacking Nuno, but I don't think that helps anything because it's just another manager who brought in a couple of players, and then you're bringing in someone else who has no influence over the actual squad. And I think, we kind of have to just stick with him for now. Maybe if you get relegated, you sack him at the end of the season. But I think if you sack him now, he brought in 2 players, then you're just making those players have come to the team for nothing.
Yep.
And, losing the last couple Prem games, those were real must-win games against Wolves and Nottingham. And, lose 3-0 against Wolves, of all teams, it's a terrible, terrible loss. We had 67% possession in that game, but 0 shots on goal.
I saw your smirk there.
Not a single shot on goal, and only a .23 goals expected in that game. If you have the ball for over 2/3 of the match, you don't even have a shot on net. I don't know what kind of attacking you're doing.
Yeah.
And then against Nottingham, we led the match for like over half of it, and then they come out in the second half and they score in the 55th minute, and they get like a kind of a crappy penalty at the end of the game and win. It's just nothing has gone right in the last couple matches, and now Lucas Paqueta is refusing to play and trying to force a move back to Brazil, which I think at this point we just have to accept that he does not want to play here anymore. Cash in for the 40 million and go buy players that do want to play here and try and fight to stay in the Premier League, players that Nuno wants in the squad, because it's not the first time that Paqueta has either not started or just not even been on the bench for us this season. And I think he's just kind of a player that at times can be brilliant.
Yeah.
but most games he's just kind of there and doesn't really provide anything for us. And, finally, maybe we can build off of some momentum off of a QPR win, but that match against QPR went to the extra time, where our new signing, Tati Castellanos, scored in the 98th minute to win it for us. So it's kind of, even against the championship team, it's not been easy sailing. And I think I kind of expected that against the QPR team. They're not a bad team by any metric.
Yeah.
They were obviously going to come into London Stadium and fight hard.
Yeah.
So I do think it's a good thing to get the win.
Well, technically it's a derby match too, so
But they are a London team.
so like you're kind of facing them in a derby situation.
But Ezra Myers, who's from our academy, started in that game. He's
Yeah.
played 5 Premier League games. That was his first ever start. It was in the FA Cup. His natural position is actually center back, but he was playing left wing back, and by the end of the game, left mid for us. And I think he had a pretty great game for us in terms of, effort on the pitch. He was one of our, most solid players in that match, I'd say. And I think it was a good showing from Somerville, finally. He has so much talent, Somerville, but there's just very little finish in a lot of his game. So it was good to see him, score in added time in the first half and then get the assist on the game winner. So I think maybe that's something he could build off of, and it would help us, maybe put together a little bit of a point streak, a win streak of some kind. And, for transfers, we brought in 2 new strikers that are not Premier League proven,
Yeah.
and now we're going to terminate the contract of Callum Wilson, apparently, which doesn't make any sense. He's our only Premier League proven striker. I think you have to keep him around.
Mm-hmm.
Even if Nuno doesn't want him there, I think, just keep him for the season at least. Why cut him at the midpoint? It doesn't really gain anything. And it just doesn't make sense to me, because he's one of our only players that scored. Why are you gonna bring in 2 new strikers that have no goals in the Premier League, and you're gonna just get rid of the one guy on attack who's been like fairly consistently okay this season? It's just kind of alarm bells in my head for that kind of thing. But I don't understand why we won't buy a new center back either.
Yeah.
Because Maximilian Kilman has been just terrible for us.
Who's your other guys?
Jean-Claude Todibo
Oh yeah, Todibo. Yeah.
and Igor Julio, who we brought in on loan.
Did you also have Diop at one point, and then is he gone now?
Well, Issa Diop's been gone for a little while.
Yeah.
But
And you had Kurt Zuma as well.
Captain Kurt, he's an interesting guy.
Yeah, he is. Where is he playing now? Do you know?
The UAE, I believe.
The UAE now, because he's
Yeah.
moved around, obviously. But
And, we also have Mavropanos on defense, who's also been pretty terrible this season.
so you think, is that like the key? If you get like another center back that actually is like competent and like playing,
Max
or
Kilman,
playing, I would say like playing to a higher skill level than the players that have been on the team right now.
Wolverhampton have absolutely scammed us out
Yeah.
of 40 million
Really?
on Max Kilman.
Yeah.
He is one of the worst defenders in the entire Premier League. He's like 6'4", but he can't win an aerial ball. And, that's where so many of our goals against come from,
Yeah.
is corners and set pieces into the box. And then we just can't defend them for any kind of anything at all.
Yeah.
And it's just always on him. He hasn't had a good game forever. He finally had a decent game against QPR.
Yeah.
And that's not what you want to see. Where, a player like Todibo, he was really poor at the beginning of the season, but he's now finding his form a bit. So I think we need to bring in Charlie Cresswell from Toulouse, or even an Eric Dier, or Dyer, whatever his name is.
Eric Dyer from Bayern Munich.
From Monaco now.
Oh yeah, he's on Monaco
Because
now.
it's a player that Nuno apparently wants to bring into the squad, and Nuno admires his leadership.
And also he's Prem proven.
I think he's a realistic target for us. I think we could get him for fairly cheap for Monaco. He's only played a couple
Yeah.
of games there. He started the first 8 games for them, but then he's kind of just been on the bench there since. So I think he's definitely a realistic player we could bring in for fairly cheap
True. I
to
think
help us.
price point is something that you need as well. Because obviously there was rumblings around a couple of years ago for Harry Maguire to go to West Ham, and that was a very big rumor. And a lot of people believed that move was going to happen, but yet Harry Maguire, yes, may be a decent center back, but his price tag is just way too high for something that for a team that's facing relegation. You need to be careful with who you got or who you get, right? Because obviously if you get relegated, those players are going to want to go, or you won't be able to afford their salary.
Well, actually, for West Ham, it's a kind of a blessing in disguise. That's also kind of making it harder for us to bring players in. Is that anyone that we sign for the first team or anyone on the first team currently has a clause in their contract that cuts their pay in half when we get relegated. So I don't think, contracts
There you go.
is going to be too much of an issue if we do get relegated, but it's going to definitely make players coming in to try and save the season way harder because, they risk losing half of their pay if they don't stay up. And I think that could force, long-term players out of the club potentially if that does happen too. And then we'd have to focus on, bringing in more of our players from the academy to start playing a bit more, which I think is not necessarily a terrible thing. It would just make the promotion a little bit harder than I think it would necessarily need to be. But I don't worry necessarily about promotion if we do get relegated. I don't think that that's going to be too much of an issue, especially with the amount of money that our ownership has. They'll just throw any amount of money possible to try and get promoted, which was what they should have been doing earlier this season, is throwing money to stay up. But they decided to be very frugal. And it's kind of left us in a very difficult spot. And I think they're kind of panicking now and kind of just letting Nuno buy players that he wants. But even when they let him buy players that he wants, certain players like Adama Traore, who had been linked to West Ham for so long, he was even rumored to have actually signed for West Ham. And then all of a sudden it's gone back and there's been no deal. And the news has kind of just fallen off because Fulham apparently didn't want to sell him because they want to keep him until the end of the year and let him go on a free for some reason.
Which is confusing because although with Adama Traore, I saw a post, it was kind of looking at his market value when he was on Wolverhampton Wanderers. Obviously, his market value went up, and then it's been on a kind of a progressive decline since the move back to Barcelona. Kind of facilitated that kind of loss in stock. But, I think Adama Traore could be a possible really good player for you. Obviously, Jared Bowen. Do you think? I think Jared Bowen would stay.
Well, I don't. Jared Bowen would definitely, I feel like, stick it out in the championship. He's been here for so long.
Same.
I don't think he would really fit in anywhere else at this point in his career.
No.
Even, he's like 29. He could go to a top team and potentially, win a big trophy. But I think he's pretty committed to West Ham.
Yeah.
I think a player like Somerville would be one that would want to move on. Because he already moved. He already got relegated with Leeds.
Yeah, and he moved.
And then he moved back to the Premier League to West Ham. But I think if we get relegated, he's another one that's just going to go to either
He's going back to Leeds.
another bottom feeder Premier League team or like France or something.
Yeah, trying to stay in the top flight.
Thomas Souček, I don't know what he would be doing. Maybe he'd just retire.
I mean, yeah, he's in his 30s now. And obviously he's been on your team for a while now, have seen the ups and downs. When was the last time West Ham got relegated?
I can't remember, but it's been a little while.
It's been yeah, because did you get relegated while you were in the London Stadium or just your old one?
Just the old stadium. They haven't been
So they haven't been relegated at least since 2012. London, the London Olympics, of course. So, but I think West Ham getting relegated might be, like you said, like it might be a blessing actually. As obviously relegation sucks, it's not great, but it could give you that reset that you need, right?
The last time they were relegated was 2010-11.
Okay, yeah, so right before the Olympics then.
I don't believe they moved into the London Stadium directly after the Olympics. I think it was like a year or two
Okay,
in
but they
limbo kind of
yeah.
thing.
Well, that was probably one of the worst decisions I think you've made.
I think it was they were trying to position themselves as, a big club,
Yeah.
and then they just didn't put the money in to make it happen, especially after winning the Conference League.
Well, there was also supposed to be like rumblings. We've talked about the stadium before. I think the stadium is like the most unfootball atmosphere stadium, I think, in the Premier League. You know, you can talk about the big clubs and their stadiums, and they still have atmosphere. I think Tottenham, their stadium is really nice. I don't necessarily think it's better atmosphere than White Hart Lane, but I think with your stadium, I saw a post about your old stadium and just seeing it had so much identity that was West Ham's identity.
Well, it had the castle,
Yeah, exactly.
and now it's just a big bowl.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just left the club without as much of an identity as it used to have. It
Yep.
used to be in the heart of East London. The hard workers club, all the iron workers would cheer on West Ham, and now it's kind of just lost that kind of identity.
Yeah,
They don't seem to have like something they're striving towards every match. They kind of just come out, play football, and then go home for the night.
Yeah, and I think it's mainly the atmosphere is weird because the fans aren't close to the pitch because you have the track around it. It's just, or you
They
kind
removed
of
the track,
It's
but
it's kind of a track, but you have that like part where the West Ham logo is on both sides, and it is really removed. So anybody that's in like the what they call the Cop in Anfield, or what they call the Stretford end in Old Trafford, which is right behind the net, you just don't have that because you're so removed from it. And I feel like with West Ham, you just lost a lot of the identity that your team once had. And I feel like that's happened ever since you moved to the stadium. That was kind of the catalyst to losing that identity. Like, you still have the identity of the fans, but the identity of the club as a whole has gone down. Obviously, you moved from having Dr. Martens or Doc Martens as your sponsor to now having, like, betting sponsors, for example.
well,
Which,
most teams have betting sponsors.
true, actually, over half, like almost a eighth of the Premier League teams have them, which is another discussion for another day. All right, it's 1:38. We got around 20 minutes left. Should I tear off the Band-Aid and talk about my lovely team?
I mean, might as well.
Okay, so since our last episode, we had Manchester United or since then, we have a new manager. We have actually been through two managers technically since then, or three managers since the sacking. And really, nothing's really happened with Manchester United. We've tied a lot of games to a lot of teams that we shouldn't have tied to. And really, we're kind of in limbo right now, but we're also, it's weird because we're sitting in a place right now in the Premier League. We're 7th place, I believe, and we're fighting for that top 4 spot. But also now we're kind of fighting to just keep that spot now, or keep the spot we're in right now, which is 7th place, as we sacked Ruben Amorim at the starting of this month. And honestly, I don't know why we sacked Ruben Amorim. So, Ruben Amorim, I didn't really agree with Ruben Amorim's style. I didn't think it really worked with the players that we had, and I just don't think it was great for our team. But yet, I don't think it's great to sack a manager mid-season when you're sitting at that point. We were sitting around 5th place. It was before the game against Burnley and before the game, of course, the game against Brighton in the FA Cup. But we were facing a battle against Chelsea and Brentford even now to get that top 4 spot, and we were fighting to get Europe, to get Champions League. But then we just sacked our manager out of the blue. And, I think there's reasons why Emram got sacked. I don't think he was in favor of the board. He did have the last 2 games in which he was doing press conferences for them, which would have been the games against Leeds and the games against Aston Villa, which he won one and then tied the other. We also had a game against Wolves around there as well. He got sacked after that. You had fiery press conferences before then, talking to the board and saying basically that he shouldn't be a coach. He came to be a manager, not a coach, not a scout. And he says basically that the other guys need to do their job. But, going to Uzak, do you think that was warranted of a sacking, or do you think that it was just the Manchester United higher-ups need to kind of have less ego?
Well, sacking him kind of just proves that he was kind of right.
Yeah.
Because if it resonates that much, you have to internally notice that he's kind of speaking the truth.
Exactly.
So maybe they should look internally a little bit, see where there's other issues, because, they've been through a couple managers now, and things were starting to improve a bit, but it's not really improved drastically. So I think new managers doesn't necessarily fix any of the internal issues they have going on. They need to see who else is really not doing their job, because for a manager to speak out against all the people he's working with, kind of like that, it definitely speaks to the other people that he is working with, because clearly there's a reason why he's saying that. And if he feels like he's doing too much for the club and he can't focus on what they actually hired him for,
Yep.
I think it's kind of warranted to speak out. And I don't think he deserved to necessarily be sacked. Things were starting to figure themselves out a little bit. They were starting to pick up some results, and now a lot of those, and now another manager is going to have to come in and make signings for their own system, and I don't think that they're really going to gain too much out of it unless all of a sudden they make the Champions League and win it next year.
Yeah, exactly. And we've been talking. It seems like we're talking again with Manchester United. It seems like it's just extremely, but we're just in a circle right now. We're in a hamster wheel, and the hamster is going on that hamster wheel because it just basically, it seems like almost every single year, or at least 2 years, we're talking about Manchester United, and we're talking about a new manager, a new system, and we're talking about the owners. It seems like we're constantly talking about that, and I don't necessarily like that. And as a Manchester United fan, I'm not confident in the direction that the owners are taking, and I haven't been confident with them since the Glazers came in. I think they don't know how to run a football club, and I think now with new Ineos does not know how to run a football club. They don't really, I don't know where the money's going. We get a new training facility, that's all fine and dandy, but yet we have a manager. They got Ruben Amorim, right? They sacked Ten Hag, and they were like, who do we get now? And instead of keeping with their interim manager till the end of the season, they got Ruben Amorim, and then Ruben Amorim had an even worse season than Ten Hag did at the start. And they got Ruben Amorim knowing he played his system, knowing he was really strict with the system and maintaining that system whoever his players were. And it seems like they didn't look at the players we had to necessarily say, oh yeah, 3-back formation is going to work. Because with the defense that we had Lisandro Martinez, who was out. So he was the one guy I would think that would work well, and I've seen it. He works well in that 3-back formation. But our main guys at that point when Ruben Amorim started were Luke Shaw, Maguire, and Lenny Yoro. Those three guys and Delict. Those four guys, 3 to 4 guys, are not necessarily a three-back center back trio. Like, they're just not. They're slower. They play an old school style of center back where it's basically you allow the player to kind of get around you, but then you slide tackle them and you bump them around. And that's not necessarily what a three-back formation is. Three-back formation is you have Alessandro Martinez, a ball-playing defender that can also play in the midfield, and you work off of each other. And I feel like if you got that manager in mind to manage your team, he should at least be a manager that can fit with the players. It was obviously they're not looking at that. They're looking at Ruben Amorim playing or managing Sporting, beating Man City, our rivals, 4-1 in the Champions League last season with completely different players. But they say, oh, that system will work. Obviously, it won't. It didn't work, and now he's sacked. And I feel like Ruben Amorim, I heard a lot of other podcasts and discussions talking about it. I kind of agree. They said, it's kind of a waste of 2 years. And I agree with that because you sacked him so early. Obviously, Arteta didn't get sacked, and now Arteta is fighting for a Premier League trophy. But they sacked him too early. Or if you're going to sack him within 2 years, you might as well have not even signed him in the first place, where we could have gained that 2 years with another manager that could have had a better system for the players that we had, and we would have been 2 years already with that manager almost. And we could have been ready for next season, and we could have been ready to finish the season out with a European placement. And I feel like it's just too early. Now, obviously, we had Darren Fletcher before. I won't talk that much about him. But he came in, obviously, one of Sir Alex Ferguson's former players. And, he was kind of put in, obviously, just because he was the head coach of the under-21s. And he was put in, and I kind of liked his mentality. He was trying to kind of push away from himself a little bit, especially the media, who were talking about him all the time. He said, Man United fans need to back their players and back their team. I also liked what he did with Benjamin Sesko. He talked apparently to Benjamin Sesko about where his positioning should be, and it's worked because Sesko's had a resurgence. He's back to where he kind of was at RB Leipzig, and where he was, and he's really showing that he's kind of the striker that Man United could possibly lean on to in the future. He has 3 goals this year already in 2026, which is something that obviously
How many did he have in 25?
2. He already has more goals than he scored in 2025 for Manchester United, and he's done really well. But Darren Fletcher is in there, and now we have a new manager. So in the time that we did our pod episode, Man United's technically been through 3 managers already, which is just absolutely crazy. Seeing our pod episode was not that long ago. But from episode 9 to 10, both of our teams have changed dramatically, technically. Your team is now, we kind of talked about your team, a downward spiral, but your team is basically almost clinched relegation. And
there's still over half a season.
So anything could happen.
Could happen still.
And my team is now getting new managers. We got Michael Carrick back. To be honest, it's a manager, but I don't necessarily think it's a better option than Amorim.
Well, he was rumored to West Ham if we sacked Nuno,
because he didn't do great at Middlesbrough. So, he's back now at the Man United job, only really as an interim until we look for options in the summer. He's managed Man United technically. He was an interim manager before. He knows some of the players. He knows Man United's identity. He might play a certain formation that might suit our players better. But I don't think that's necessarily an improvement from Ruben Amorim, who managed our team this season, and we were sitting in the top 4. Speaking about managers, what's happening at Real Madrid? Xabi Alonso hasn't been sacked. He's been relieved of his duties mutually, according to Real Madrid and Florentino Perez. They had an official statement, right, saying that both parties mutually agreed for him to leave. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't know necessarily how mutual it was.
Yeah.
I think it was he was told they wanted to move a different direction. He's like, well, screw you, but okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it's a little bit shocking.
Well,
They were having a good season.
It was kind of the same thing with like Ruben Amorim a little bit. It was kind of, I woke up and you just saw a picture of his face from Fabrizio Romano or Sky Sports or whatever, and it was like manager relieved of his duties.
Well, same thing happened to Maresca at Chelsea. Too.
Exactly. Maresca, you just woke up one day and they were like, oh, he's sacked now or he's out of the team. And it's like, okay, what are we going to do now? Real Madrid, I think, doesn't have to worry that much because Real Madrid is Real Madrid. I think it's weird if you think about it. If you look at the stats of Xabi Alonso, you could say, yes, Real Madrid technically haven't had a great season when you look at some of the results that they've had, but yet they're only sitting 2 points away from top space in La Liga, 2 points behind Barca, and they're second place in the league. So necessarily the league is fine. In the Champions League, they're top 6 in the Champions League phase, so they're fighting for that spot. So they're going to make the round of 16, and obviously that's Real Madrid's coveted trophy and coveted competition, where they've won the most out of every other team. But I don't necessarily know why they sacked him. I read some articles to try to kind of piece together an explanation of why they would sack him, and I got a couple of responses. One of them was Xabi Alonso wasn't liked by a lot of the players and the higher-ups. According to this one article, it said he had a clash with Vinicius Jr. About playtime.
That doesn't surprise me.
It doesn't surprise me either, right? But he had a clash with Vinicius Jr. and some other players. Mbappe was put on that list. Bellingham was put on there. Bellingham and Mbappe both kind of have told media that those reports are not true. Bellingham especially was kind of angry about the responses, saying that he didn't like Xabi Alonso and didn't trust him. But there were some trust issues, and those trust issues as well were kind of there in the Club World Cup. So Xabi Alonso's kind of first forte being that Real Madrid manager, and there was some rumblings that they didn't really like his tactics and they didn't believe in them.
Then why hire him?
And then
in the first place.
And then Mbappe, I know exactly. And the clash with Mbappe happened just recently during the Supercopa or whatever, the competition that they had with Barcelona in Saudi Arabia, I think, that they lost. It was in, let's just see, just to make sure, in Jeddah. Real Madrid lost against Barcelona.
I did not hear about that game.
And Barcelona won a trophy. And of course, that's like, you don't lose against Barcelona, and especially in Spain, those two teams clash all the time, and Florentino Perez didn't like that they lost against Barcelona. Granted, they did win the first El Clasico this year in October. And apparently, during that game, there was a guard of honor, Xabi Alonso wanted to be respectful and do a guard of honor, basically standing while the Barcelona players went to pick up their medals and clapping them, basically. And a lot of Madrid players didn't like that, and Mbappe especially didn't like that, and they stormed off the pitch. I feel like that's just some entitlement with Real Madrid players, not necessarily Xabi Alonso. I feel like Xabi Alonso just wanted to be respectful. Obviously, Xabi Alonso knows the implications of that match, especially in El Clasico. He's played in it. He understands that that is a huge game, and that if you lose that game, even if it's just a league match, that there's a lot of things going on in that derby match. But apparently they didn't like him. And, they didn't like him, and there was some disagreement. I don't know why he left. Now, we only have like 4 minutes left, or 6 minutes left, actually, on this screen. I want to talk about, obviously, because we have our Instagram post had Paris FC, and we haven't talked about Paris FC yet. So let's talk about Paris FC. So Paris FC beat PSG 1-0 in the Coupe de France round of 32. And it's a big derby match, and the underdogs came out victorious, and PSG were goalless.
If I'm correct, it's Paris FC's first time ever beating PSG too.
And it's crazy because obviously they were together in the 70s. They were actually together as a team, and they broke apart. And of course, I looked at their history, and their history is like up and down. There's like random teams in there. They merged with teams. They disbanded with teams, and they found themselves out of French, like the French professional league, and they had to get themselves back in. And it was kind of a roller coaster. But what a game and what a story. Obviously, Akone, former PSG academy graduate and winger for like 7 games. More well known in Spain and in Fiorentina.
He played for Fiorentina. That's where I knew him from.
And now he's on Paris FC, and he scored the only goal. It was a beautiful counter attack, and they scored. But I think for that game, and one of the main things is PSG. They missed a lot of chances they should have scored. The goalie on the Paris FC team, which his name is Nkambodo,
something like that.
Yeah, he got 7 saves, so they got 7 shots on target. He saved all 7 of them. He saved a beautiful strike from, I believe, Vitinha at the end of the game, and there was 2 missed headers. One of them was from Desiree Doué. It came up to him right in the 90th minute. And he was literally in the box, and they missed to the right post. And some of the Bradley Barcola, I believe, hit the post, or just missed on the left side. So it wasn't necessarily a game that PSG were necessarily the bad team. I just think they missed a lot more chances than they should have. And this year in French football, I just want to point out, is really interesting because you see, well, PSG is second because, of course, Lens is first right now. And
the league is just very competitive.
It's more competitive right now. Obviously, you talk about PSG in League One, you're like, well, PSG is going to win again. They won almost every single trophy last season, and now they're out of the Coupe de France. They're fighting now to actually. They're only 1 point or 2 points, I believe, but they're fighting for that top place. And it's really, really cool to do. And this is really cool that they got out of the Coupe de France. It's the first time they haven't made the round of 16 since the 2012-2013 season, which just shows the dominance that PSG has had. And it's just really neat to see. You know, we sometimes in French football, you see this when PSG falters, but you don't see it all the time. Like, obviously, there's times where Olympique Lyon wins or Marseille is winning. Like, you see those times, but those times kind of are in the past right now. And it seems like PSG is that kind of just dominates the league, and they call the league a farmers league because of it. But obviously, it's really good for French football being more competitive. I don't think Paris Saint-Germain fans are very happy, but it's a really good story coming out of France. And I mean, of course, Paris and Paris FC plays in a stadium that's very close to PSG.
Yeah, it's directly across the street. It's the closest derby in the world.
And it's really neat to see. And also, they played in the Parc des Princes before PSG.
Did they?
Yeah, so it's actually technically their home stadium as well. So it's really cool to see that they played, and what a game, and just really, really good for French football. And I really love Paris FC because of that.
Well, they've got good ownership for sure.
Yeah,
they've bought really well this season, I think, and it leaves them in a good spot to stay up for sure.
Yeah, so we hope that Paris FC, because they had a good start to the season and they've kind of faltered a little bit. They're kind of like a Crystal Palace, but they're actually facing relegation, or they're not in the relegation spot, but they're battling to try to maintain their spot in League One, and it's going to be interesting to see the rest of the season. All right, I'm going to end the pod here. I've been Liam, And we've talked about some pretty cool topics, most notably the FA Cup drama. Congrats to Macclesfield Town for their triumph over Premier League outfit Crystal Palace. Now, Zach, do your sign off as per usual.
Bonjour, au revoir, and good evening.
Ooh, okay. See you later, guys.